everyone. Tonight I'm going to talk about what I call the fast foodification of our democracy. I'm going to explain what's gone wrong and how we're going to fix it. It's not a particularly novel insight that our politics isn't working, but if any of you need convincing, we'll walk through some of the evidence. Polling has been showing that trust in our political leaders and our institutions has been breaking record lows right up until the global pandemic. The Scanlon Foundation's Mapping Social Cohesion yearly report asks the question, how often do you think you can trust government in Canberra to make decisions on behalf of all Australians? The answer, most of the time, has been averaging 30% for the past decade. The answer, almost always, only 5%. The 2019 Australian election study conducted by ANU after the recent federal election found that just 1 in 4 Australians trusted their political leaders and institutions. Only 56% said that their democracy was working well. Professor Ian McAllister, who conducted the study, he said he'd been working in politics and studying elections for the last 40 years, and he'd never seen returns that bad in public trust and satisfaction with our democratic institutions. The research is pretty clear, but we don't just have to rely on that. We can take a quick glance at the long list of difficult problems that are gathering dust in the too hard basket. They range from climate change, healthcare, recognition, tax reform, drug legalisation, industrial relations, aged care. The list goes on and on. I could even ask you, hands up if you think our politics isn't working well. To be honest, I can't see much, but it looks like everyone put their hands up. It seems the case is closed then. Our politics is just not working well. In fact, I actually think that our analysis is wrong. I think our politics is working too well. Let me explain why. Originally, our electoral systems were designed to produce an aristocracy that would replace monarchic rule. The idea was never that everyone would have a say in all of their governance. An exclusive cohort of voters were given the task of what old mate Thomas Jefferson described as distinguishing between the natural aristocracy and the pseudo-aristocracy, or the wheat from the chaff. Those who earned their place in the elite through virtue and through talent, versus those who inherited it through wealth and through birth. But we know how their story's been going. Slowly, as the centuries have gone by, we've invited more and more people the opportunity to vote. Some of the brightest moments in human history have come from struggles to win the right to vote. So closely do we link enfranchisement with our individual humanity. As such, voting is utterly enmeshed with what we think of as democracy. The logic of these adversarial decision-making systems is that they produce a competition of ideas, where those with more merit outshine those with less. The best arguments win through the sheer force of their persuasion. However, for the competition of ideas to really work, it needs to incentivise the development of better public policy. But to do that, the voters and all the participants need to be in on the rules of the game. Without any norms or rules or competitions, they just ultimately incentivise winning. The end goal of our electoral systems? To get elected. As currently practiced, our politicians and our elections prize each other apart as they demonise one another to win votes by making promises they can't or probably don't intend to keep. Voters, you lot, carry the burden of separating the wheat from the chaff. But if you're like me, your life is probably quite busy, and the chances are that your one vote will change the outcome are quite slim. It's a rational ignorance to not spend hours and hours learning about candidates and policy issues, particularly when you're indifferent, don't trust our political institutions, or just straight up don't like politicians like most Australians. This has resulted in the fast foodification of our democracy. The ingredients no longer matter. It's become a competition, a race to the bottom. The only goal is to just gather more and more votes. All the frills have gone off. Policy areas are treated as battlegrounds. Short electoral cycles incentivize politicians to look beyond the policy issues with long-term implications and indulge in the short-term interests of voters. Newly elected governments even overturn the progress of previous governments just because. Like all systems, we find extremely clever ways to optimize them. But sometimes we find incredibly stupid ways. Since 1968, between 1968 and 1988, the average soundbite from a US president on the US network news has gone from 43 seconds to 9 seconds. Now, turbocharged by social media, our election campaigns are full of fantastical post-truth claims. Now, it's not as bad here as it is in the US, but even I remember when the Labor Party's carbon tax was going to make a roast cost more than $100. It doesn't have to be this way. It's hard to believe from what we've made of electoral politics, but human beings have a natural ability to see one another's point of view and find compromise. Our politics doesn't have to suck. Fortunately, we've figured out a way to fix it. And we actually figured it out quite a while ago. Around 403 BC, the ancient Athenians, they were making most of their governmental decisions with small representative groups of citizens. But these citizens, they weren't elected. They were chosen by lot. This here is a claratoria. It's an ancient Athenian lottery device. Selection by lot, sortition, random selection, these are all terms for what is now commonly referred to as a democratic lottery. To the Athenians, selection by lot was an essential element of their democracy. In fact, political theorists from Aristotle right through to Montesquieu and Rousseau, that was the case too. Now, I'm not talking about direct democracy. It wasn't a principle of Athenian democracy that everyone would be involved in every decision. That would have been impractical in classical Athens as it is today. But through lottery, citizens who were interested were given an equal and pretty high likelihood of being selected to public office. The Athenian democracy's institutional ability to harness the latent and diffuse knowledge spread throughout its population was crucial to its flourishing. Now, we've rediscovered the use of democratic lotteries, and it's time for us to use them for our own flourishing. You may have already heard of them. A citizens' assembly in Ireland to help them become the first country in the world to legislate marriage equality. A citizens' convention in France for the climate. Or a community solutions panel on infrastructure prioritisation in Byron Shire Council. That's right, your own council at the forefront of democratic innovation. Crazy. The idea here is simple. We draw a representative sample of the population and give them the ideal environment for them to find agreement on solutions to problems. That group would be stratified to match the wider population, so there'd be an equal amount of men and women. There'd be plenty of young people, but there'd be some old people too. There'd probably be some wealthy people, but most of the room would be full of everyday people like you and me. Although you yourself might not be selected, someone of your age, gender, from your neighbourhood or background would be. Someone just like you. Now, don't worry. Do not worry. If you feel like you've got a burning contribution and you have to participate, you'd be able to make some kind of public submission to your citizens so that they could consider it. This is important because it's important that we capture that diverse knowledge in the community, just as it was in ancient Athens. I don't think that we would miss if any one person wasn't able to vote. But if someone with critical knowledge and an insightful argument wasn't able to participate, then that could be damaging. But critically, this is not government by public opinion poll or referendum. What we're trying to do here is move beyond everyone's off-the-cuff response and develop considered public judgment. We would give them plenty of time to become informed critical thinkers so that they could develop robust recommendations with the advice of experts who they call for themselves. Now, of course, we'd need to motivate vast swathes of a politically disinterested population, but I think we could make it easy and appealing to participate. We would compensate them well for their time, provide them with accommodation and childcare where needed, but importantly, we would give them meaningful authority. We would make it so that their recommendations carried real weight. We know that these groups of diverse people outperform groups of high ability problem solvers, but where these groups really shine is in their ability to find common ground. Making public decisions is tough. Decisions need to be made on multi-dimensional issues, and that's hard because there often aren't usually obvious avenues for compromise between the two. Take something as mundane as like family tax benefits. If a set of family benefits created a modest work disincentive for single parents, I don't think that would be the end of the world. But if we created a family tax benefit that created a slight bias for two-earner households, no, I probably don't think that would be the end of the world either. Obviously, if we went really, really far in one direction, that could be bad. But if our main view was that we should do more to help families with kids, then I'd like to think that we could come together and find agreement on something that we could all live with. That last part there is key for me, that we can all live with. It turns out that we can find agreement on a lot of things. We just need to build a politics that's about talking to one another rather than yelling at one another. Instead, at the moment, our politics encourages our two major parties to stake out sides on either end of the family tax benefit issue and use that to beat each other over the head. If that happens over something as simple as a family tax benefit for children, then we can extrapolate it out to bigger, more complicated issues. I've been working at the newDemocracy Foundation for a while now. I've had a front row seat to the growth and momentum in this space. I'm confident this is the future of government. At some point, we will have parliaments full of randomly selected everyday citizens working together to solve complex problems just like they did in ancient Athens. In fact, right now, we have an old Parliament House in Canberra that we could fill. It could be a third parliament whose agreement would pass legislation instead of the Senate. In Queensland, they only have one House of Parliament. We could reinstate the one they got rid of and fill it with a democratic lottery. Right now in Europe, permanent citizen bodies are spreading everywhere. In Belgium, they're developing these mixed parliamentary committees full of everyday Belgians and MPs. Something similar is happening in Scotland, and the foundation for it is being laid here. Personally, I've been doing this in places as diverse as Malawi, Madrid, Melbourne, and North Macedonia. And those are only the places that start with M. There are several things that you can do right now to help advocate for these ideas. You can advocate for the use of random selection in your schools. Teach your kids about the merit of lottery and the woes of election. But also, teach your school principals. Elections are actually really bad at predicting which students will be good leaders. While those roles are great opportunities to build confidence and skills in the kids who are turned off by the showmanship of elections. You can ask your local politicians that they advocate for citizens' assemblies to resolve long-standing issues like the shopping list I had on the screen before. And I think on a personal level, you can rethink your own approach to politics. Make it less adversarial and Make it more problem-solving. After all, what are the odds that you and your political party are right about literally everything? They're pretty low, by the way. At the end of the day, there's no wrong or right answer to these complex, multidimensional problems and competing views of the world. There's just an answer that a community agrees it can live with. And I think that's what we should be building our politics around. Working together and trusting everyday Australians. Thank you.